It was a time when a man's honor meant something. It was a time when a man's word was enough to seal a bargain. It was a time of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table in a magical place called Camelot. Now one winter, Arthur and his knights and their ladies were spending the Christmas season at the castle in Carlisle. During the day, the men would go hunting for boar and stags and foxes, and at night there would be feasting and dancing that went on way into the night. Now on Christmas morning, Arthur went out with his knights to hunt. And as he was hunting, he noticed a white stag, a beautiful white stag he'd never seen before. And so he followed that stag deep, deep into the forest of Inglewood to a place that he had never been before. And then the stag disappeared, and he noticed he was all alone in the forest. He had never been there before, and he was standing at the bottom of a black and brackish pond. And as he looked around, on the other side of the pond was a knight, astride a midnight black horse. And the knight was dressed from head to foot in shiny black armor, as was the horse. Suddenly the knight raised his sword high into the air and galloped across that pond and stopped within a few yards of Arthur and said, "Arthur, long have I waited for you. Long I've hated you. Arthur, prepare to die, for I will have your crown and I will have your head." And he raised his sword, and Arthur reached for his own sword, Excalibur, which saved him from all kinds of evil. But it was lying safe back at the castle, and he sat like a statue on his saddle, unable to move. And Arthur looked at the knight and said, "Would you kill an unarmed man? If you kill me like this now, there would not be a knight in all of the kingdom that would swear allegiance to you. They would hunt you down like a boar. Let me go back to the castle and get my sword, and I will come back, and we will have a fair fight. I promise, I give you my word." And the knight, whose name was the Knight of Tarnwathland, said, "I care not for your promises, I care not for your word, but there would be no joy in killing you so easily. Very well, Arthur, you may go back to the castle, but come back armed, not with a sword, but the answer to a riddle that I will give you." And Arthur said, "Oh, I'm good at riddles. Ask away." And the Knight of Tarnwathland said, "Arthur, do not be so sure. Listen carefully. I will give you a year and a day to find the answer. Arthur, what is it that all women desire most in life?" And with that, the knight turned and disappeared. Arthur could feel the strength returning to his body, and as he rode his horse out of the forest, he wondered, what is it that all women desire most in life? And he stopped every young woman, he stopped every old woman, every maid, every maiden, every grandmother, every mother, as he made his way back to the castle, and he asked them, "What is it that you desire most in life?" And each woman had a different answer. Some said beauty, some said a rich husband, some said they would like wisdom, and one poor old grandmother said, "I just wish for a good night's sleep." Arthur knew that none of these were the correct answer, and when he got back to the castle, he was greeted by Guinevere, his wife, and he asked her, "Guinevere, what is it that you desire most in life?" And she said, Oh, my husband, what I desire most in life is to be of service to you." And Arthur knew that wasn't the answer. And so Arthur asked every cook, every scullery maiden, every lady in waiting, "What is it that you most desire in life?" And every woman had a different answer. And so it was, in a year and a day, Arthur mounted his horse to ride back into the forest of Inglewood to meet his destiny. And as he rode, his head full of thoughts and his mind deep in thought and worry, he noticed a flash of scarlet on the side of the road, and then he heard a woman's voice. "Good day to you, Arthur, and may God be with you on this fine morning." And Arthur stopped and turned. And there, sitting on a hollow log, was a hag, a monster, a truly loathly lady. She sat there on that log. Her gray streaks hung down in greasy tangles down to her shoulders. She had one eye that was swollen shut, and the other one was open but oozing pus. She had a bulbous nose that was covered with warts, and her skin was dry and flaking. Her gash of a mouth held 2 horses' teeth, and her scarlet gown was a fine, beautiful woven gown, but it was twisted out of shape by her grotesque body, and on her hands were fingers that were rings that were fine enough for Guinevere, but her hands were gnarled and dry and hung like claws at her side. And the woman said, "Arthur, are you so proud that you do not answer a woman's greeting?" And Arthur said, No, forgive me, madam. I was deep in thought. I did not see you sitting there. Oh, I know, Arthur. I know what troubles you, and I know the answer to the riddle you seek. What is it? Said Arthur. Please tell me. My life depends upon it. Oh, not so fast, Arthur. If I give you the answer to the riddle, will you give me my heart's desire? Oh, madam, I would give you that and more. What is the answer? And she said, Arthur, bend down. Come closer. Let me whisper it in your ear. And Arthur got off his horse and went up to the lady and bent down so she could whisper in his ear. He shooed away the flies that buzzed around her head and held his breath from the stench that emanated from her body. And she whispered in his ear. And Arthur stood up and said, Of course, I would not demand less for myself. Madam, what is your heart's desire? And she said, Oh, Arthur, not so fast. Go into the forest, find the Knight of Tarnwaithland, and if it be the true answer, come back, and I will tell you my heart's desire. And so Arthur mounted his horse, and with a light heart he rode into the forest of Inglewood, ready to meet his destiny, ready to meet that knight. And when he arrived at the appointed spot, the knight was waiting for him, and he said, Oh, Arthur, I see you are a man of your word. You are a man of honor. Do you have the answer to the riddle? And Arthur said, Oh, I have many answers. Well, what are they? Said the knight, and said, Well, is it beauty? No. Is it youth? No. Is it wealth? No. Is it a good night's sleep? No. Those are all foolish answers, said the knight. Arthur prepared to die, and the knight raised up his sword and got ready to strike. But Arthur said, Oh, I have one last answer. Well, be quick, said the knight. I do not care to wait all day. What is it? What is it that all women most desire? And Arthur said, What all women desire most in life, sir, is sovereignty, the right to make up her own mind and to choose how she will live. Oh, said the knight, who told you? It was my sister, the Dame Ragnell. She told you, a curse be on her. And he raced into the forest and he was gone. Arthur rode his horse back to where the Lady Ragnell sat waiting for him, and she said, Arthur, I see my answer served you well. Are you ready to give me my heart's desire? Oh, madam, that and more be it half my kingdom, for I owe you my life, said Arthur. And the lady said, Well, what I desire most in life, what I would like from you, Arthur, is that one of your knights, strong, handsome, brave, to take me as his wife. Arthur felt as if a blow had been delivered to his stomach. He said, Madam, if I was not already married to Guinevere, I would gladly marry you myself, but I cannot give you what is not mine to give. Oh, well then shall it be said that Arthur, High King of Britain, has broken his promise to a woman? No, madam, said Arthur. No, I will keep my promise. You will have your knight. And Arthur got back on his horse and he rode off toward the castle. He did not look back, for if he did, he would have seen the Lady Ragnell looking back at him, her one bleary eye full of hope, fear, and longing. When Arthur arrived at the castle, he was greeted by Guinevere, and she could tell that something was wrong. And she said, "My husband, what is troubling you?" And he put off her worried questions until after dinner, when all of the knights gathered in the great hall. And Arthur told him about his meeting with the Knight of Tarnwaithlin, and how it was the Lady Ragnell who had the one true answer, and how it was that he had promised that one of them should take her for his wife. "Is she bonny?" says Sir Kay. And Arthur said, "She's a freak. She's a hag. She's a truly loathly lady." And one by one, the knights began to leave the great hall. Those that were married were silently gave thanks for their own wives, and those that were not left one by one, all except one, Sir Gawain, the youngest, the most handsome, the bravest of all the knights. And he came up to Arthur. He said, "Arthur, let me be the one to save the king's honor. Let me be the one to marry the Dame Ragnell." And Arthur said, "Oh, Gawain, I cannot ask it of you. You must see the lady for yourself, and you must decide." And so the next morning, early, Sir Gawain and King Arthur mounted their horses and rode off toward the forest of Inglewood. The morning was beautiful, with sun shining, but they took no interest or joy in the beauty of the day, and all too soon they arrived at that spot where the Lady Ragnell sat with her twisted gown on that hollow log. And Gawain got out of his horse and began walking toward the lady, and somehow he was drawn to her. Some strange power just sort of drew him to her, and he bent down on one knee and took her gnarled hand in his and said, "Madam, would you be my wife?" And the Dame Ragnell said, "Oh, Arthur, please, do not tease me." And Gawain looked in that one bleary eye, and something in that eye touched his very soul. And he said, "Madam, I do not jest. If you will have me, I would take you for my wife." "Oh, Gawain," said Lady Ragnell, "I promise you will not be sorry." And then Gawain and King Arthur lifted the lady onto the waiting horse, and they rode back to the castle. Now all of the court had come out to see Sir Gawain's bride. And when she came close, the men turned away in horror. Some of the women fainted. Some of the women were angry. This Gawain was the most eligible bachelor, and he was going to marry this monster. Only Guinevere came up, and she put her cloak around the Lady Ragnell's shoulders to hide her from her shame, to protect her from her shame. And that night there was a ceremony, a wedding ceremony. No one took joy in it. And after the ceremony, there was a feast, but no one had the stomach to eat. And after the feast, there was dancing and music, but no one had the heart to dance. And all too soon, the dismal evening was over, and Sir Gawain and the Lady Ragnell were led to the bridal chamber, and the door closed behind them. Gawain sat in a chair, and he gazed into the fire, deep in thought, and he could hear a woman's gown rustling behind him. And then he heard a woman's voice. "Gawain, Gawain, my husband, am I so ugly that you cannot bear to look at me?" Gawain tore his gaze from the fire and turned and looked and stood up, and his chair pushed over, and he said, "What have you done with my wife? Who are you?" For standing in front of him was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. Her skin was like ivory. Her eyes shone. Her hair flowed in waves down to her waist, and her smile lit up the room. And she said, "Oh, Arthur, Gawain, I am the Lady Ragnell. I am your wife. You see, I was under a spell. And by marrying me and taking me as your wife, you have broken the spell, but only by half. For half the day, I can be my own true self if you see me now, but The other half of the day I must be the hag that Arthur found in the forest. It's up to you, my husband, to choose. Would you like me beautiful by day and ugly by night? Or ugly by day or beautiful by night? And Gawain said, I would like you beautiful by night for me and me alone, but if I make that choice, then there would be no place to hide your shame. You would be shunned by the court during the day. And if I wish you beautiful by day and ugly by night, soon I would grow to hate you, to despise you, and our love would be for naught. Madam, I cannot decide. You will have to live with the consequences. You must decide, and I will live with what your decision is. And the Lady Ragnell looked back and laughed and laughed and laughed. She said, Gawain, Gawain, you have broken the spell completely, for you have given me what all women desire most in life. You have given me my sovereignty, the right to make up my own life, to make up my own mind, and to choose how I will live. And so I choose to live as I am now, both day and night. Gawain embraced his wife, and they rose late the next morning. Now, I cannot tell you what transpired between that embrace and the next morning. But let it be said, as soon as the bridal chamber was opened, they were greeted by an astonished court. And when they told them what had happened, they had another wedding ceremony that everybody enjoyed. And then there was a feast, and everybody ate. And after that, there was dancing and singing that went way on into the night. And Sir Gawain and the Lady Ragnell lived happily for the rest of their days. Thank you, thank you. Now, this has been kind of a sad year for storytelling. The national scene lost 3 wonderful storytellers, Steve Stanfield, Rosalind Bresnick Perry, and Sid Lieberman. And the Detroit Story League also had losses. We lost Doris Cooney, we lost Linda Day, and we just lost Nola McDonald. And so I wanted to kind of commemorate them by telling a short story that Sid Lieberman made famous, mainly because I could remember it. I wanted to learn one of Linda's wonderful stories, but it just didn't work for me, so only Linda could tell it. But so this is a story that Sid made famous, and I called his wife Adrienne, and I asked if it would be okay if I told his story at Telebration, and she was really overjoyed and thanked me for it. There was once an evil king who wanted to get rid of his Jews, and so he called the Jewish people to him and he said, choose someone among you to debate me, and the debate will be in sign language. If you can answer the questions, you can stay. If not, everyone will have to leave. Well, the Jewish people were up in arms. Who wanted to debate the king, much less a king in sign language? And finally, one day, a little chicken seller named Yankel said, well, if nobody will debate the king, I'll debate him. So on the day of the debate, a big platform was sent out constructed in the middle of the town square. The king stood in his fine robes on one side of the square, and little Yankel stood on the other. The king said, I will give you 3 signs. If you can answer them correctly, the Jewish people can stay in my kingdom. If not, you'll have to leave. And here is the first sign. He threw out his hands with his fingers outstretched. Yankel put a fist in front of his face. Correct, said the king. Very good. Here is the second sign. And he put out 2 fingers. And Yankel shrugged and put out 1 finger in front of his face. Correct again, said the king. Amazing. If you can answer this last question, your people can stay. And he reached into the folds of his gown, and he pulled out a piece of old, moldy cheese. Yankel shrugged, reached into his pocket, pulled out an egg. Correct again, said the king. Amazing. You and your people can stay. Now, as soon as the Jewish leaders and Yankel left the square, the king's advisors gathered around him and said, Your Majesty, what happened? What did you say? What did this chicken seller say? And the king said, it's amazing. The Jews had a little chicken seller who could read and answer my signs. I put out my hand to show him that the Jewish people were scattered all over the world. And he held up his fist to show that they were one in the hand of God. I put up 2 fingers to show there were 2 kings, the king in heaven and me, the king here on earth. He put up 1 finger to show there was only one king, the king in heaven. And then I pulled out a piece of old moldy cheese to show him the Jewish religion had grown old and moldy. And he pulled out an egg to show it was fresh and whole. Meanwhile, back at Yankel's, everybody had gathered into the chicken house. Yankel, what happened? What did you say? What did he say? What happened? And what happened? And Yankel said, I don't know. He put out his hand to grab me. I put my fist to show him I punched his lights out if he tried to touch me. And then he put out 2 fingers to poke my eyes out. I put up 1 to block him. And then I guess he thought I was going to stand up to him. Maybe he was a little bit afraid. So he took out his lunch, and I took out mine.